Hi, welcome back to Live at Heart Southeast. And to today's panel, it takes a village to raise a creative child, where we're looking at the role of culture and the creative industries in economic regional development outside of the traditional capital cities. And I'm pleased to have with me today Lynne Best from the Fourth Pillar in Belfast and London, Andy Jones from Focus Wales in Wrexham, and Fred Schmidt, MBE from Wild About Music in Austin, Texas. And just to give you a brief background on the panelists today, Lynne has worked at PPL in the UK as head of communications before setting up Fourth Pillar, splitting her time between London and Belfast in order to champion the importance of the global cultural and creative industries through campaigns, communications and advocacy. Fourth Pillar is currently focused on the music sector in our homeland of Northern Ireland and will work across the music and creative communities to collaborate on strategic initiatives that benefit the wealth of talent and accelerate the growth of the burgeoning music industry in the region. And Lynne has recently been appointed as Project Director by Belfast City Council for the Belfast bid to become a UNESCO City of Music. So, hi Lynne.
Hello, thank you.
Andy is the music booker and co-founder of the Focus Wales Showcase Festival and has worked within the music industry for over 15 years as an artist, label MD and promoter. Focus Wales is an annual international showcase festival and conference for the Welsh music industry and takes place in Wrexham each year, placing the industry spotlight firmly on the talent that Wales has to offer the world. And 2021 marks the festival's 10th anniversary. So hi Andy, and thanks for joining us today. And finally, Fred is an MBE, a UK Royal Honour received for services to UK-US relations, and amongst other roles has been the MD of International Affairs at Capital Factory, a key Austin tech accelerator, and the Chief Representative in North America for London and Partners. And Fred's worked tirelessly to develop international collaboration between the US and various international partners, something I myself have personally benefited from. So thank you, Fred, and hi, Fred.
Good to see you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. So the three panelists today bring a shared knowledge of, and more importantly, a passion for the development of creative economies in Northern Ireland, Wales, and Texas, respectively. So welcome all. Thank you so much for joining us today at Live at Heart Southeast. And we're going to look today at exploring the role of culture, music, and the creative industries in economic regional development with a view to examining talent attraction and talent retention in those regions outside of the traditional capital cities. And during this chat, I'd like us to explore key themes of place, infrastructure and network, and the role that advocacy can play across all of these themes. So if we start with place, in a time of post-pandemic acceleration of trends that we're seeing at the moment, they're seemingly pointing towards an increase in migration out of the capital cities. So what part will this play, do you think, in the potential location of creative talent? So if we can start with Fred, maybe.
Okay, sure. I think I would probably snapshot it as saying we are in a very unique and unprecedented time in that because this last year has really caused everyone to reflect on where they are and what they're doing and how they're living and the affordability of their places. There's a lot of migration, as you said, Mark, happening all over the place. And creatives want to go to places where they can afford to live and have the freedom to pursue their work. It's pretty much that simple. If I can, I think perhaps just touching on Austin as an example of how it came to be might be useful in the context of this conversation. So Austin, as viewers and listeners may know, is now billed as the fastest growing city in the United States. It is 11th in size, soon to be 10th biggest city, but it wasn't always that way. You go back 50, 60 years, Austin was 1/10 the size that it is today. It was a population of about 250,000 people, a sleepy government city as the state capital of Texas. and it had universities here, so it was also a college town. And what started happening was kind of two parallel tracks that occurred concurrently, but they were very different from one another. So one is what I would call the intentional recruitment track. Okay, so our city government, our county government, the Chamber of Commerce, and city and industry leaders all got together and said, we want to recruit what was then the early burgeoning tech industry to Austin as another pillar of industry besides government and academia. And so they started to attract very intentionally, with incentives and those other usual economic tools, large corporations who could benefit from the talent graduating out of the university network here, et cetera. And they were very successful over about a 10 to 20 year period. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. You have to have a plan, you have to execute it. But over about a 10 to 20 year period there in the 60s and 70s, Austin was successful at recruiting IBM and Tracor and 3M, to name a couple of individual large corporations who set up subsidiaries here. And they also got they bid on and were successful at attracting two large consortia at that time, one in the microcomputer industry, which was like 10 typical competitors who would never join up to do anything together. But this was in the face of Japanese competition in the electronics industries in the 70s, and 10 US companies banded together and created the microcomputer consortium in Austin. And behind that, they recruited the semiconductor industry here. So we had this basis over about a 10 to 20 year period that recruited the early technology industry. At the same time, completely different, via a different means, the music industry started to gravitate to Austin, okay? That's what I would call the organic track. And how that worked was musicians from around the state, from places like Lubbock, and Willie Nelson came from Nashville, and Janis Joplin came from Beaumont, to get out of their cities that were not affording them either the opportunity to pursue their creative work, or it was too expensive in some of their cities to live. And they gravitated to Austin because it had this university crowd, which was an appreciative audience that, you know, young people want to try new things. They're more experimental. And so they were open to all kinds of new music. And so a music industry began to form here just completely organically, because it was cheap, had an audience, and they could begin to work on their craft. And so over about, again, a 10 to 20 year period in the 70s and 80s, the music industry formed this big industry event that most people are now familiar with. South by Southwest emerged during all of that, starting with the music industry, then adding on film and the technology side of things. And so that formed, and those two things formed over what is now about a 50-year period, to give everyone some context of how long this stuff takes to create something that is large, sustainable, has massive economic impact that can be quantified and studied now. So that's kind of an overview of how a small town that, you know, Austin was like not even on the grid against Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, and San Antonio as the bigger brothers and sisters in the Texas family of cities, if you will, but suddenly pulled up, you know, to become the largest and fastest growing city of this kind, which should give inspiration to other smaller cities and regions that are looking to develop their economies in a purposeful way.
Lynne, I guess that's a perfect link to you, because splitting your time between London and Belfast as you are now, yeah, you've seen those opportunities, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect segue. And I will say that, Fred, that does give me inspiration. You know, I think when I listen to you talk about Austin and the 50-year journey that you've been on, it motivates me and excites me that hopefully in 50 years or less, you know, we will be, I'll be sharing that same story about Belfast, because we really have the creative talent. Without a doubt, we have fantastic musicians. We're starting to attract a lot of business, but I wouldn't say we have developed a really strong industry, joined up industry just yet. And so to hear the journey that you've been on, it does inspire me that that we're on the right path and we'll get there too one day. And as you say, Mark, I am splitting my time between London and Belfast. I was one of those people that moved away to London in search of a real job in the music industry. And now I find myself coming back to Northern Ireland as the industry develops, because I want to be there. I want to be part of that growing sector. And the theme of placemaking, which is, kind of how you kick this question off, it's so topical right now. So I'm working with Belfast City Council, as you said, on their UNESCO bid to become a UNESCO City of Music. And that's part of the council's 10-year cultural strategy, which puts culture and music as part of that at the heart of what they want to use to make Belfast a really great place to live and to work and to visit. So it's very, very topical. And one of the partners in that project is also Sound Diplomacy, who as an organisation have spent the last, I think, 6, 7, 8 years working with music cities right across the world to really develop music and musician-friendly policies to see how they can support that infrastructure, that creative talent, and really make that city a lot more attractive for those, again, who want to live, work, or visit there. The thing about Belfast, I would say, I think we're quite unique sometimes in this, though others watching this may tell me I'm wrong. Belfast is a relatively affordable place to live and to be, and there's a real sense of pride from the musicians who work there. They want to be part of that community. They want to stay in Northern Ireland to help to grow and develop the scene. So actually, they don't really want to move away to London or to Glasgow or Manchester or other UK cities to develop a career there. So we need to look at how do we not just put music at the heart of Belfast for our local residents, for the local public, and that's very much what the UNESCO bid is about, but how do we make Belfast really friendly for those musicians and music businesses that want to start up there, want to continue to grow, want to connect, and want to contribute to that growing creative economy in Northern Ireland's capital city. And really the key answer to that would be the infrastructure point. We need to look at what businesses are there, what support do those businesses need, what skills or connections are we missing, and of course, what is the role of local government and our national government? Because Belfast and Northern Ireland, whilst it is known for its music heritage and its great history, it doesn't really have a strong, joined up, fully developed music industry. But I do believe, as I say, we're firmly on our way to developing that. So it's quite an exciting journey to be part of.
Andy?
Well, it's a really interesting one. I mean, from the perspective of the work that we do and how we began in the first instance, we created Focus Wales in a town called Wrexham, in North Wales, in a part of the country that borders England, but has perhaps historically, or for a long time at least, felt a bit overlooked and underinvested in. And, at the point of starting Focus Wales, there was perhaps from our side an element of frustration that we were losing talent, and the talent that was still there wasn't perhaps getting the support, the love that we felt it deserved. And, we felt that there was a real problem there then in the sort of, a theme I do come back to a lot is the talent development pipeline. We were seeing artists, just think that the only way was to go to London and, they just fall off a cliff, so to speak, when it doesn't work out quite quickly. So, we felt that something needed to happen. And why not Wrexham? I mean, for us, you see, if we look at Wales, Wales is over sort of, I think, over sort of punched above its weight is perhaps a good way of putting it in terms of its musical output. And I think a large part of that is that it is a very creative place to be. We've got some of the best recorded studios in the world there. Rockfield Studios in South Wales has produced some of the biggest albums of all time, whether it's from, your Led Zeppelins and Clash and, all of that 90s stuff from Oasis and, Stone Roses before that. And, that all came through those lovely studios in the south of Wales. And the same is true all over the country, really. It's a really creative place to be, a good space to be. I think, what we've seen during the pandemic is a lot of people sort of retreat, find more affordable places to live. Wales is definitely an affordable place to be, and as a creative, so I definitely sort of encourage people to consider Wales as a place to sort of stay, especially if you're a Welsh creative, because I think similar to the challenges of the music community in Belfast, we are all about trying to find the best ways of retaining our talent, both those who want to work on and off the stage. I think it's really important for the sort of the health of our creative sector that we do retain that talent and that we can attract talent to the nation, so yeah, I think it's going to play a really important role. I think the thing that we've always got to work with in Wales is that it is so fragmented. You have these you've got a lot of the creatives dotted all around in the little villages and coastal areas of Wales. They're not all based in Cardiff or your bigger areas like Wrexham in the north. So I think, there's positives and negatives, I guess, to that sort of makeup. But, I think it's a positive, really. I feel like I've digressed there. Have I digressed? Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's cool. So to expand on that point, culture, obvious. So now we are looking at the business of culture as well, which sometimes has to be stressed that there is a business around culture, and it is an economy and an industry as well. And sometimes we do have to fight to make that point be recognized. And when we're talking about infrastructure, so what would you say are the necessary components for the development of a successful regional creative economy? So if we are looking to set up a state of creativity in a region, what is it that we need to become that state of creativity?
Well, I like to work in points of three. So I would say there are three key factors, but I'm sure others may disagree with this, but this is my take on it. First of all, it needs joined up thinking. That's where it needs to start. There needs to be that united, coordinated and agreed single vision that this is something we want to do and we'll work on it together to get to that end point. I think then as part of that, it needs leadership, to bring all the players together, the stakeholders together around one central focal point, whether that's an industry body or a central forum just for discussion. It's all well and good having this thriving scene bursting with talented musicians as we maybe do in Belfast. There's funding available to support them to get started and on their way. There are numerous educational initiatives left, right and centre. What we're lacking, is that someone or something that can bring it all together to promote it, to champion it, to support the coordination, identify greater opportunities, to create a network and to remove the silos that might exist. Just someone to really bring it all together. And then thirdly, and I think this is something that, different people will have different takes on, but I think it needs government recognition. Now, I'm not saying that that is equivalent to government funding. Do we want to be a sector propped up by the government? Of course we don't. We want to be self-sustainable. But there needs to be a recognition at the top of that tree that says, we know music is important, not just socially and not just within the community, which undoubtedly it is, but also economically. We see the benefits that it can bring. We consider you in this way. We'll work with you to ensure that music has the foundations and the framework that it needs to grow an industry. And just to say, we see you and we value you and what you do, we will engage with you. So that openness and that readiness is not always quite there. And I think, frankly, without it, it's harder for an industry to emerge and to shape and flourish. And quite frankly, even believe in itself as an industry. So as I say, for me, it's about joined up thinking, it's about leadership, and it's definitely about that government recognition. That would be that would be my take on it.
Absolutely. And Fred, obviously you've seen, as you've just said, but the development of Austin, especially over time as well. So you can probably give us your thoughts on what components for the infrastructure were required, but then also as well maybe highlight some of the gaps that you recognized that needed addressing with the development of the creative economy in Austin and Texas wider.
Well, to amplify on what both of you have said on this topic, we don't have to reinvent the wheel anymore in asking whether or not music and film and theater and creative industries have economic value. Okay, this stuff has now been fully quantified. We've quantified it on an Austin level. It's been quantified on a Texas level. London has done all kinds of research and studies on this too. And it's absolutely undeniable, irrefutable that the creative industries are a economic force to be reckoned with. And so South by Southwest, that one festival, 10 days, okay, not last year and not this year because of the pandemic. We unfortunately had to skip that event. Hopefully it'll be back very soon. But South by Southwest, for the last 5 years that it was running, has delivered over $300 million of economic impact to the city of Austin in 10 days, okay? Just that one event. So, and when we have quantified the economic impact of the year-round creative industries in Austin, the music industry that we have here, the live music capital of the world, the film industry that is very vibrant here, the software industry like video gaming, et cetera, we're talking in the several billions of dollars of economic impact. So all that leadership, to Lynne's point, has to do is avail themselves of the research that exists, okay? Just look it up, absorb it, believe it. and at that point, you know, this thing that we always kind of tend to put to the side to say, oh, that's just music, you know, that's what I do for fun. You know, we have to quit doing that to it. And, you know, actually in Europe, I'm a native European from Poland originally. So, you know, I'm kind of have my foot in that camp as well. You know, Europe has always valued the role of culture, always, everywhere, and invests in it, but it's always, you know, in the form of charities and grants and, you know, things like that, which are great. I mean, the creative communities need that. That's kind of basically their investment capital to work with. In fact, it could be more, but the main thing is to help enable and empower it to get on its feet, to actually produce its own forms of recurring revenue, which it can do, especially now with technology. It can find regional, national, global audiences, okay? So to be able to really recognize that that possibility exists, I think is the absolute most important thing for any area to be able to really start to harness the power of what it can bring. And you know, going back to my Austin illustration, the one thing I would say is that culture becomes the glue that holds your community fabric together, okay? It's emotional. It's, you know, the technology industry business is all transactional. It works with your brain and your pocketbook. Culture comes from the heart, okay? And the heart is ultimately more powerful than all of the other business and transactional components because it's sustaining. I mean, we're human beings who want to be a grouping species and be connected by something. And yes, technology is the means that is connecting us these days, but it's still us as human beings that are using this platform to be with each other when we otherwise physically cannot. It's the creative industries is that glue that holds that fabric together and ultimately is the sustainable part over the long haul, because, you know, frankly, the business comes and goes. You know, acquisitions happen, companies disappear. Of the 6 different computer companies that I have helped co-found or help grow over my 30-year plus career, none of them exist anymore. Okay, they're all gone. They've been acquired. You know, we have great IP that's sitting in the basement of some, you know, large corporations list of assets that they don't even know they have anymore that was purchased 20 years ago, but they're all gone. You can only find them in the pages of Wikipedia. But guess what? Willie Nelson is still a resident of Austin, Texas. And, you know, culture really plants itself and grows and thrives when it finds a home that it loves and that loves it.
Andy?
I think it's really vital that we've got long-term strategic investment for every key stage of the talent development pipeline. So, you know, it's important that grassroots level artists and creative have the support and infrastructure around them, and opportunities to gain support from grant systems, for example. and similarly that you've got support and investment potential at the product development stage, and then similarly then you've got at the far end of that, you've got, you know, music. Then those key three stages do need that long term, as I say, very important strategic investment, and it really does need to come from government. In Wales, we are very lucky that the government have been, I think, increasingly in recent years supportive of the creative sector. They realise that, I think, what I believe in is coming from this place that, you know, it does deliver in terms of economic impact, of course, job creation. It's ticking all of these boxes, but of course, it's significantly a brilliant sell on Wales, so it's sort of self-perpetuating. You know, it's sort of it comes back tenfold, really, because, you know, you're investing in the careers of all these creatives that create all these fantastic pieces of work that travel around the world, and through that process are promoting the place where they come from. So it's the best advert for Wales in that respect. And, you know, so they see that sort of that return on investment come back tenfold. So it's a smart move, I think. But yeah, you know, I feel very grateful that we do have that support in Wales. We are sort of, in some respects, we are in the early stages of the journey, though, because I feel like it's only in the last couple of years that the conversation has turned to looking at those key stages as I identify them, and going, look, that grassroots element of development needs serious pan-Wales investment. And through Welsh Government's Creative Wales Department, they've been really hands-on over the last year in developing new projects and looking at what support they can implement to ensure that that long-term support base is there. And as I say, that applies, in my view, to both those who want to be on and off the stage, because if the support is here, we keep the talent here. So it comes back to that you know, importance of place, and why it's so important that we can keep our creatives at home creating. Not always, you know, we don't want to cage our talent in Wales, but, you know, I do think it's really important that we keep the talent here, and that sort of investment, that infrastructure is really important to that.
That's it. So the creatives feel that they can create locally for that global market. They don't have to move, to the traditional capital cities.
Of course, yeah. And in a digital age, it's like, why should people move? And, you know, I've just seen so many horror stories of artists from Wales feeling that they do need to do that big migration to the big smoke, wherever they deem that to be. Quite often for Welsh artists, that's moving to London. And, you know, because they'll be obsessed with a particular label, or perhaps the way that it's worked out for another artist, and they presume that that is the only way that things can be done. But there's loads of ways that things can be done. And, you know, through the work that I do in terms of artist development, I'm forever telling artists to sort of like use their own sort of mind, and, you know, assess what is going to be right for them in their career, and, you know, devise a career strategy that works for them in their life. You know, it's you know, you don't have to completely sacrifice everything and move to a big city far away from home to chase that sort of Hollywood dream. You know, I think there's lots of ways you can do it. For some artists, you know, they'll just get traction in, you know, it's happened for lots of Welsh artists where it's really sort of taken off in another country. And it's that spark that's helped generate the sort of fan base and the career back home or across Europe. And, you know, I can point to a few Welsh artists where perhaps their bigger fan bases are over in the States, namely, you know, the Joy Formidable and perhaps Neck Deep are another really good example of that, who, I've just got that little bit more traction in North America for whatever reason. You know, radio have picked it up and they've just got the buy-in from the music community. And, you know, I mean, these things sometimes happen through, targeted strategic planning, but sometimes, you know, it's a bit of an accident that a song catches fire and it just works in a particular market. But this idea that you have to move to London and that's the only place where it's going to work is, I just think those days are gone, really.
Excellent, interesting to hear as well. I'd love to pick up on that point, especially Fred, when we talked about network, and the importance of network in regional creative economies. If we are to enable our creators, like you say, to create locally for a global market, how great a part do you see that network playing in the infrastructure? So the network as part of the infrastructure as well. And I'll raise it to you, Fred, at first, obviously, because that was your role at Capital Factory with the tech companies, was kind of building those relations there. So what role do you see as network from within a region as being an important part of infrastructure?
It's a super important part, because again, that provides the peer-to-peer tools that enable any industry or group of people to learn and to find the solutions to the problems that they face, which, we all have problems every day, and as entrepreneurs, that's, the big new buzzword, of course, with, it's been around since ancient times. Entrepreneurship is just doing something, making something, creating something that other people want, and you find it and you give it to them. That's entrepreneurship. And so having groups of people, it becomes a really valuable problem solving and advancement framework. So at Capital Factory, our organization there is about 50, 60 people, but we have 700 companies in our portfolio, okay, that are part of the community, the infrastructure. Some we've invested in, others are part of incubator and accelerator programs, others are there just to co-work. But it's this density, okay, of a place where people can aggregate and they find the supportive infrastructure. With 50 people, we can't begin as a staff to service the needs of every one of those companies and all their problems and all their stuff, but by giving them a place where they can all come together, both online and in a physical space, which we hope to get back to here soon, at the coffee machine, so to speak, where you stand around, you just talk about what you're doing today and what your problem is, and the guy next to you or gal next to you suddenly has some solutions, and I can introduce you to so-and-so. That becomes invaluable because the peer-to-peer network is larger, far more scalable, and far more capable of delivering results than any instructional program, than any top-down kind of a process, which again, you can intellectualize, but it's harder to implement an entire curricula than it is for you to raise one very specific problem and have another person give you a very specific solution that you can act on right now and move past that to your next opportunity. So, creating that, like we have done in the technology industry now the world over. I mean, as I've dealt with countries, the smallest, the country of Georgia, is all over this stuff. So as we have done there, we can do this in the creative industries too. And one of my favorite examples is both BIM, the British Institute of Modern Music, that you and I first met over, Mark, when you came in search of Austin as a potential expansion location for BIM at one point, and also Tile Yard in London, which is basically the same thing that we've done in the tech industry, but one is academic, BIM. It's not just teaching how to make music. It's not teaching just how to produce music. It's the whole thing. It's the business of music. It's the touring of music. It's the merchandising of music. It's the artistry of music. And it's that whole comprehensive solution in a campus environment with campuses in many locations on the continent, in the UK and in the US. And that provides that network for companies, or for in this case, musicians to launch off of. And Tile Yard has done the Capital Factory of London by putting together a creative campus with all these studios and infrastructure and services and live music space and a craft brewery and a restaurant, so it's a place that can bring people together and help them help each other.
Absolutely. And Lynn, how are you finding that in Northern Ireland, that like having to look at developing that network? Because I guess that's the key challenge that we have, is when we are trying to retain talent and attract talent, that talent wants to know that it can have the support in taking its creation to a global market. So how are you working with that in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, as Fred says, you know, as you say, as with anywhere in Northern Ireland, having a network in Northern Ireland, even though it's a relatively small place, is just vitally important. And the industry at the moment, I think back home, has so much going for it, but I wouldn't say that everyone is working together and is part of that joined up network. So that is absolutely something that back on the ground we are trying to respond to. We're trying to create that network to stop people operating in silos and to try and join things up, join up the dots a little bit more, because I think you can achieve so much more as an industry when everyone is moving in the same direction, as opposed to just, you know, doing their really good initiatives but working on their in their own little groups. I think as well, even if you, well, especially if you come from a small place such as Northern Ireland, you can never know too many people. I remember someone telling me that way back at the start of my career, and I have held on to that for my own career as well as when I've been working with others. Because in this industry, although it's a cliche, relationships really do matter massively, whether that's relationships with governments or with your own peers and colleagues, whether that's you know, in the local sector or your international counterparts. It's vital to be connected, because through that opportunities can come, learnings can come, progress can be made. You know, so in my role, for example, you said at the start, Mark, I split my time between London and Belfast. A lot of people thought that when I left PPL to set up my own business, that I was going to move to Northern Ireland and be based there permanently and live there. But actually, I felt that I could only be truly useful to those in Northern Ireland, to add value to what they're doing, if I was able to maintain my relationships and connections in London. And therefore, I split my time between the two cities, because I want to be valuable to the sector, and I hope I can bring more to all the good work that's already happening there. So if there is one thing to invest in, it is worth investing in your network. And I was thinking, as we were preparing for this panel, you know, there are so many ways that you can invest in that network nowadays, in terms of practical terms, for anyone listening to the panel and listening to what we say. You know, there's so many ways to expand that network, even, well, especially as you're working from home, if we're still in lockdown. You know, you've got events like this one, obviously, where you're going to see so many new faces and businesses that you can connect with. Also, I would say it'd be remiss of me not to mention a couple of events in Northern Ireland where you can continue that networking. But there's a great event called Output Belfast every February, which brings the industry together. It's Ireland's largest one-day music conference. And then there's also Sound of Belfast in November, which is a week to 10-day long program focusing on the music business and showcasing all the talent that we have across Northern Ireland. So I couldn't not do a little plug for those. So please come and network with us at those events. There's also trade missions. You know, your local government body may join up with other territories and other organisations. So I use, for example, the BPI, which is the trade body I used to work for. Heading up PR there, they are the trade body for major and independent record companies. And so they join forces with other trade bodies and with the government to host trade missions in LA, if you're interested in sync music and getting your music on film, TV, video games, and in adverts. They've just announced an online trade mission with Nigeria. So, you know, that's taking trade missions online, but really great opportunity to network and establish new contacts in another country. You've got amazing international showcases, as Fred mentioned. There's South by Southwest, and then for other more specific genre ones, there's Folk Alliance, there's Romex. There's a whole host. If you just research them on the internet, you'll be blown away by the amount of opportunities that there are. Fred mentioned as well Tile Yard. I'm a big fan of Tile Yard in London. Just again to give a bit of a plug for Belfast while I'm here, and for Northern Ireland, you've got the OEM Music Centre, which I'm the vice chair of, which is its own hub in the centre of Belfast, dedicated to music, both the development of music businesses and music talent, and a lot of outreach and community work. Also in Derry, or Londonderry in Northern Ireland, you have the Nerve Centre, which is another fantastic creative hub in that city. And then one of the things I was thinking is that, you know, social media, it does connect us all. I think we take it for granted, but it's another really fantastic way of expanding your network on a daily basis without even maybe realizing that you're doing it. You can look up any of the speakers, I'm sure, in this conference and connect with them. And feeling that, there's always good old-fashioned email. If you want to connect with someone, the details are always there. And I think if you don't try, you never know. And if you don't ask, you don't get. So it's really worth investing time in your network. I'm seeing that in Northern Ireland. I have seen it in London. I've seen it with a lot of people that I've worked with. And yeah, you can never know too many people, so go out there and find them.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I think, network is such an important part of the industry, and having that network or an access to that network initially is so important, which is why we started Focus Wales. As I've alluded to, Wales, a lot of the creatives are so fragmented and dotted all around the country, and quite often it can be quite, I think, growing up as a creative in Wales, you can feel quite isolated. If you're growing up in the sticks, as I did, not knowing anybody, not having anybody to ask about how do I release a record, or who do I contact if I want to get played on the radio. So on a very basic level, being able to bring people together so that they can share information, exchange contacts, maybe spark up a relationship so that they can start working together on some level, was the whole inspiration behind starting Focus Wales from the get-go. That we knew we did have an industry, and people would talk about Wales as not having an industry, and that we more so barnacle onto the English industry. Whereas to my mind, I knew fully well that we had dozens of record labels, we had lots of festivals and promoters, lots of artists. All the key ingredients were actually in Wales. It was just fragmented. So Focus Wales was about bringing that together, and through creating that network, that environment, that essentially, with a bit of nurturing and a bit of investment so that we can develop it and bring in sort of more outside knowledge and investors from across the music world to it, those networks would grow. And then, we'd have more self-sustaining artists based in Wales is the whole inspiration behind it. And it is working. We're 10 years in now with long-term support from our Arts Council and from government. And we're seeing the results with, a more productive music scene, more artists working with record labels and management and touring, and more tipping point artists turning the heads of the global music industry. So it is working. It does take time, but that all comes back to creating that network, that opportunity for people to connect and share. And similarly, that extends to the sort of international networks that we develop through new pathways for artists from Wales to be able to access the industry in different markets, whether it's taking artists to an event in Sweden or to an event in the States or Canada. I think it's important that that opportunity exists, that it's supported, that the artists aren't just given a grant and waved off at the airport, that there's a process there, that people are supported through that whole process. And as a result of it, hopefully we can see more artists developing teams in overseas territories. So again, it just furthers the sort of cause and helps create more sustainable artists. We're seeing it work. I mean, we've had the support to be really pushing our international export activities for the past 5 years now, hosting showcases at events like M for Montreal, South by Southwest. People used to say to us before that, actually, people are more so interested in the sort of, the British presence at these events. You confuse them if you start talking about Wales, is what people would say. This is the narrative. And I would just say, well, I attend a lot of events around the world as a speaker, and I find that people are often really interested to learn about Wales, that we're a bilingual nation with our own language and culture and musical history, which differs to the other nations on the British Isles. And, we've got our own story to tell, and people are interested. So, we began doing our South by Showcase, I think it was 2017, and they've been really, really popular queues around the block. People are really interested to discover your Boy Azukas, or your Maylor Jones, or whoever it might be that's coming through that we have at the showcase. It's been encouraging, really, because it's the sort of fruits of our labor over time, I guess. But it has it's paid off and it's worked out. We've seen artists pick up record deals with labels in the States, pick up new managers and booking agents, and it's happening. But again, it needed that strategic investment so that we could create that international network, so that we could fill the room with delegates. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's working over that time.
Absolutely. And just to pick up on something that you said, Lynne, about, takes us on to the next point as well, the role of advocacy, because I know that was a key element of your relocation to Belfast, was advocacy in that role as well. And Fred, you touched on it, and Andy the same, about access to governments, and how do we ensure the buy-in of these regional governments? We talked earlier about being able to quantify the business of culture, so people recognise the importance of that. So how do we advocate to ensure that the recognition of the economic as well as the cultural benefit is there as well? So Lynne, how are you finding it now, advocating across two countries?
Yeah, so we're at the start of that journey as well. And I think just it's worth saying, Mark, that whenever we refer to advocacy, I think that word puts a lot of people off sometimes, where they think, well, what is that word? But for me, and for my work in communications, advocacy is simply telling a story to influence change. It's all about that storytelling. But it also goes back to the importance of building relationships so that you have people to try and tell that and sell that story to. And as I say, that is something we're exploring in Belfast. How does the music sector develop and strengthen its relationship with government, and how do we convey the value of our sector, not just socially and within the community, but importantly economically? And so something that hasn't been done in a few years is we have commissioned some research to quantify the economic value of the commercial music sector to Northern Ireland. We need to give people something to buy into. The statistics, as I say, they're out of date. But what we have to keep in our minds as well as we go through advocacy is the so what. Always ask yourself that question. Yes, the music industry is important and you tell someone about it, but so what? That's what they're going to be saying. You need to make it relevant to them, and that's where that narrative and that storytelling, bringing your industry to life, looking at local examples, looking at how many jobs the sector creates, the types of jobs, the excitement that comes from those, the motivation, the skills, the opportunity to educate next generation, and and the opportunity to put Northern Ireland on the map as a musical territory. Show them why they should care. And again, just to go back to that point, it's not necessarily because we maybe want funding from them. We can want many a thing from them, but that at the very basis of it, I think we just want them to become true advocates themselves, not just to contact the industry when, dare I say, they just want an artist to wheel out to launch their next initiative. You want people to really buy in to the importance of music and to get it. So you want your advocacy to turn them into advocates. Advocacy, it gives people a voice, brings people together, it facilitates collaboration, but it also educates people and it motivates people so that change can be delivered. So yes, we're at I wouldn't say the very start of that process. It has been done in recent years, but what we're trying to do in Northern Ireland is have a fresh look at that, to see what that means now, especially coming out of COVID, when the sector has been so badly hit by the pandemic, to say, well, what is that story that we're telling, and how can we best get people to buy into the importance of this and truly believe it and become advocates for the sector themselves?
And Fred, I guess you've seen that a lot in both Austin, with the city, and with the Texas government as well. The need to have those conversations, especially around music, having the Texas Music Office as well. And how?
I was just going to say, Mark, I because we're at the other end of this journey from where Lynne is right now, but you will get there. Because we have quantified and researched and awakened ourselves to the economic value and sustainability of the creative industries in our community and in our state, we have actually institutionalized this process. So this is like challenging government to change its thinking, 180 degrees, instead of, the advocacy implies that you're on the outside, constantly trying to get someone's attention. You're knocking on the door of government. Please pay attention to us, help us. It's this pleading voice, and government is sitting there very busy doing government stuff, like, building roads and, taking care of electricity and blah, blah, blah. But you can turn that around now. We have to get past that, okay? Because the evidence is clearly out there. And so in Texas, both at the state level, as you just mentioned, Mark, we have institutionalized, we have a Texas music office, which also embodies the film industry and the gaming industry, all of the creative sectors. And even at an Austin city level, we have a Austin music office, and also it works with the film group and the technology creative sectors team to have that door always open. I mean, there are people in charge of not, begrudgingly, reluctantly listening to your plea. Their job that they're being paid for is to help you, to bring opportunity to you in the other direction. Whoa, isn't that refreshing? So I'm just saying, we got to get past this constant, inability to recognize the value and contribution of the creative industries in the way that most people, for sure, of a business and governmental nature, respond to, which is money. The economic impact. That research is out there, and again, many cities at this point. You mentioned, Lynne, sound diplomacy. Many cities around the world have studied this stuff, have quantified it. So that research is out there. So it's, to me, it's up to city and regional officials, if they want to play in this arena, to do their homework and to get serious about it and say, here's what our economic offerings are, our cultural offerings, our quality of life offerings to the creative community, to attract them and make it easy for them to respond and come to their place and contribute. They want to do that. They will find a welcoming, open-armed audience, but they have some obligation in this process too, the leadership, the officials.
And just to take that on, Fred, I'd just like to finish. Someone who has lived in and been part of this huge expansion in Austin over the years, and I guess that's why a lot of us look to Austin, to see how the creative industries and the tech industries have kind of like merged and grown. So you've borne witness to the benefits and the costs of that expansion as well. So just briefly, could you share with us any pitfalls that may be of that economic expansion, given 2020 hindsight, as we would all love to have? What pitfalls have you seen with regards to the rapid expansion of Austin? So how do we ensure that we don't kill our golden goose while we're looking to set up our states of creativity?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the sober moment that we are in today of 2021 now with our 2020 vision, it's a be careful what you wish for kind of scenario in Austin. Okay, we have succeeded, beyond our own wildest dreams of achieving the kind of density and synergy and community that we had always hoped for and worked hard for and tried to make happen. But what happens at the other end if you haven't really figured out how to create sustainability in the process is the thing we all struggle with everywhere when this situation happens. Austin is also twinned, not everybody knows, but with the London borough of Hackney, okay, in East London, that a dozen years ago, when I was first brought there on a trade mission, potentially to expand my company into London, and UKTI led me around into East London. I'm going, I've never been to East London. I've always Central, West London many times, but why are we going to East London? They go, well, something's trying to happen here. This is just before the Olympics. And so in Austin's 50-year journey, but Hackney's basically 10-year journey since the Olympics, the same sorts of conditions have given rise, which is gentrification and unaffordability, okay? And so the creative class, who are the people along with immigrants, okay, who run, your convenience stores and, the services that every, group of people need in dangerous places that nobody else wants to open a shop or whatever. The immigrants come in, of which I'm one. As an immigrant entrepreneur, you go in and you start to provide the economic value that a community needs, and the creative class comes along and takes a place and makes it cool. Suddenly, you know, you've got neat little coffee shops that open, and then a few restaurants pop up, and next thing you know, some galleries start to appear, and then there's this density of the creative class that happens, and then whoa, all the real estate professionals and economic development people show up in the investment group, and they all start writing checks, and things go kind of crazy because they buy up all the property. Okay. And all that property that was cheap that they couldn't give away, empty buildings, you know, miles of high street storefronts that were sitting there suddenly got populated for, you know, very cheap by the creative class to make it cool, make it vibrant. Suddenly they get priced out of their own neighborhood. Okay. And that's the tragedy. Now, the one thing that I have learned that we're really suffering from right now in Austin is, you know, we've priced out our creative class. They cannot afford to live here anymore. And many of them, I mean, if you're Willie Nelson, yeah, you have a big ranch outside of town and you have a place in Hawaii and you're living the good life. But most other creatives are finding they have to move an hour or two now outside of Austin. And the floodgates really, really opened up about 3-4 months ago when Oracle announced that they're moving their headquarters from San Mateo, from San Francisco area to Austin. And a guy named Elon Musk suddenly decided he's bailing out of California too, and has become a resident of Austin and got himself a Texas driver's license. It's like, oh my God, now we're on the global map. And literally California is now moving to Austin. You could see the procession marching. And what's happened is in just the last 3 months, our cost of living and our affordability of housing and real estate has gone up about 20%. Okay. And it's unsustainable. And so if you don't get out ahead of this curve and figure out how to help, my most important advice to every community out there that's looking to get into this game is help the creative class get some equity. Give them some skin in the game. Don't just give them policies and even give them money. We've right now during the pandemic, we've got cities around America that are starting to offer bounties. If you move, entrepreneur, tech guy, musician to our city, we'll give you $20,000 to come here because they've been hemorrhaging population for decades. Besides just money, they need places where they can benefit from the economic prosperity that they are helping to create. So, the creative industries can never afford that first down payment. They can't afford to buy the building that they're in, or that studio, or that abandoned warehouse. That is how to help the creative class get an equity position in their own future success, so that they have an incentive to stay and that they have a reward at the end of their contribution that equals what everybody who comes after them gets out of it, while they're just being forced to move on to the next city and figure out how to help make it cool.
Andy?
Yeah, I think it plays a really important role. And if I look back to the start of the journey that we've had with Focus Wales, it comes back to somebody taking that chance, believing in the case that we were making, that this would be really important to the Welsh music community, to the creative sector in general in Wales. If we had an event like this that could bring people together, we've had to learn how best to communicate to those people over time. When you start out doing this, it's a labor of love, and we're coming from the background of being musicians and promoters, and we didn't know how to communicate with ministers and people at government, and it felt like those types of people were inaccessible. But the more we've gone on this journey, the more we've realized that actually the work that various government departments are doing goes hand in hand with the mission of what we're doing with Focus Wales. And whether it's the mission to increase the number of Welsh language speakers in Wales, and how our events can play a role in positively promoting the use of Welsh language, or whether it's to talk about the creative industries as something that can deliver great economic impact for areas that ordinarily don't have huge events or huge investment in arts events such as Wrexham. You know, we become a good sort of example and blueprint to you know, for government to be able to demonstrate to other parts of Wales that you could do similar things in your part of Wales. But that initial sort of part of the process, yeah, it required somebody to believe in what we were doing, who could then go into bat for us, and sit alongside us in a meeting with Welsh Government, could sit alongside us in a meeting with Arts Council of Wales. And we've got very quickly attuned to how it is that we can pitch what we're all about and what it is we want to do, and we understand that the process evolved now. But yeah, certainly starting out, it felt very, very difficult to get those conversations underway. You know, I mean, the Arts Council of Wales was only at the point when we first began, I think in 2011, you know, they were only just at the point of looking at investing in festivals of new music, as in, you know, festivals other than strictly classical music events. So, you know, that's not long ago. So it's still relatively early part of their journey in terms of investment into new music, or acknowledging how important that is to our culture, and what role it has to play. But yeah, it's been encouraging to see the changes over the years, and we do have you know, we do have champions of what we're doing across you know, across key areas in arts funding now, be it at Arts Council of Wales or Peers Foundation, who've been big supporters of what we're doing, and of course at Welsh Government, who supported us long term through their major events unit, to develop our infrastructure and grow the scope of the events, both the conference and the festival. So I think it plays an important role, and Wales can be a good example, I think, to other parts of the world. Because if we can do it in Wales, you know, you could do it anywhere really. We're a small nation of 3 million people, and we've been able to create a music industry event that is known around the world now, and does attract investors to the events each year from right across the globe. And you know, our music industry is beginning to thrive as a result.
And I could literally sit and talk to you, crew, for hours on this, and I'm sure that we will again soon. So thanks so much for your input on this. So a couple of key things that I've written down here: desirability of place, importance of culture at the fabric of the place, access to networking and storytelling as the advocacy of that, and the need for quantification of our business. But key, ensure sustainability for the longevity of the development of the local creators for global economies. So Lynne Best, Fred Schmidt, Andy Jones, thank you so much. I cannot wait to see you all, just to sit with a drink and be carrying on. And I'd love to pick up this conversation in 6 months' time as well, just to see what feedback we've had and what lessons we all learned, especially with regards to the lessons learned from Austin. So all of you, thank you so much for your time, and everything. Couldn't have asked for any more. So I look forward to seeing you all very soon, and thank you for being part of Live at Hot South Southeast. Cheers. Bye-bye.